Good morning, everybody. I'm Big the Dave, and this is more garbage programming. Just double checking you can actually hear me this time. Good. So last week we did a tutorial on the singleton pattern in Unity, and it was a little bit over the top, I think, for a first one. But this time around we're going to do something a little bit more simple, and that is pub/sub. Now, what is pub/sub, you may ask? Pub/sub is short for publish subscribe, and is pretty much that. You publish things subscribe to it. It's a good pattern to have in your toolbox because it is everywhere. Even if you don't realise it, if you come to do any kind of networking, any kind of message systems, you will come across publish subscribe pattern. So what does publish subscribe do? How does it work? What does it give you? So in Unity, it allows you to decouple from the event system. So, for example, if we add in here a button, this on click, if you wanted this button to do something normally, you would have to add that in there. You would then have to drag in an item there and tell it what to do. So if I go in there, press that, and then do that, you'll see that it turns off the light. That's fair enough, that's simple, that's what Unity is designed to do. It is a good way of doing things, it is the way that Unity is built and it's working within Unity. However, pub/sub allows you to work beyond those bounds. So, for example, if this button was a prefab and was stored in your assets library, you wouldn't be able to turn that light on and off with that button. You would have to code in the spawner, so you'd have something that would instantiate the button. You would then have that object say, "Hey, you're going to be in charge of turning this light on and off," and it's going to hook it. You're going to have to program it to hook into the on-click movement and then do the thing, and you're still hooked into that hard-coded way of doing things. With pub/sub, what you do is you would set this button to publish the switch off the light event, and you would have the light subscribe to that event, and even if that light wasn't there, that light was not a thing, you would publish that event, it wouldn't care, it would do nothing. What it can also do is allow you to have more than one thing subscribed to an event that doesn't give you a whole swathe of events down here. So you don't end up with event hell in this. So this is going to be quite a short tutorial because pub/sub isn't actually that difficult to explain or to implement in a naive sense. There are more things. There's more you can do with pub/sub than just what I'm going to do here, but it is a good start, and we shall decide then what to do after. I think I might go and just do pooling because pooling is also quite a short one. I plan to do that next week. However, the problem with next week is it's very close to Christmas, as in it is Christmas Eve, next Thursday. And I was thinking about doing next Wednesday as a stream, but I have got other things on Wednesday afternoon, so that would have to be moved to another day again. So Thursday, I don't think I'll do any programming next week. I might do some games, actually playing some games. You know, what they normally do on Twitch. So, if you're on YouTube and it is not yet the 24th of December 2020, you can come on and I will be on then. every Thursday at 11 a.m. UK time, I will try and be on and do some streaming of programming stuff, normally. Occasionally do some game stuff. That probably won't be happening over Christmas because, as you could probably guess, Thursday the 31st of December is New Year's Eve. Could do a stream then, I guess. Probably another game stream. I don't know. Me and a friend, we are also planning on doing a charity stream at some point for Macmillan Cancer Research. We haven't yet quite decided what's going to happen with that. The other guy, he's the one that's kind of organising it, and I'm trying to, tell him we need to figure out what we're going to play for it. He's got a bunch of games, but there is more than just 24 hours worth of games for that. Anyway, that's beside the point. Back to PubSub. So, this is a brand new, empty project, literally your basic project for Unity 3D. We're just going to create ourselves a nice little script here called PubSub Broker. Now, this is the basis of your publish subscribe. So in Unity, there are lots of ways you could think about this. So you could have a static class, completely static, not a mono behavior, just completely out with the Unity experience itself. Again, as I said last week, pure statics are kind of an anti-pattern in Unity. You really want to have, mostly for debugging purposes, you really want to have some game object in the world to be able to visually debug that in the same way you would debug everything else. So the way we're going to make this PubSub Broker is we're going to make it a game object in the world. What this will mean is that when you change scenes, it will automatically clear all your PubSub queues. If that's not what you want, you can deal with that and possibly do not destroy unload. You could possibly, again, make it a pure static, but make sure that you're hooked into the Unity editor hooks so that you can clear the PubSub stuff whenever you change from play to pause, or from play to edit mode. Hi Shep, welcome back. So we're going to start with the PubSub Broker. It's going to have two main functions: publish and subscribe. So we'll just load up Visual Studio. Again, I'm an idiot for not starting up Visual Studio before the stream, but this stream was a little bit seat of your pants sort of thing. I was doing something else earlier and not lost track of time, but more I was prepping for the stream and it took longer than I thought. I was dicking about with OBS and adding some new stuff to it, because if I'm going to do multiple things per stream, I want to be able to click add stream marker at the end of these thing. So here we go. PubSub Broker. So you guys should be able to see my IntelliSense now, because before I was using window capture rather than screen capture, which meant that you couldn't see my IntelliSense, which was bad because half of programming is IntelliSense. So this is going to be mono behavior. We are going to do public static PubSub Broker instance and private static PubSub Broker underscore instance, and we're going to do our static getter. So it's not going to be, it is technically going to be the singleton pattern again. It's going to be a little bit less, it's going to be a little bit less strict than last week's singleton pattern. We don't want if there, we want instance equals okay, so what we need here actually is, a way to create a new game object with this on it and return that. So we want a function called create new broker, and it's smart enough to create a static of it. So if instance is new broker, otherwise return instance. What we want to do is instance, new game object pub sub broker, game object.adds components pub sub broker, and we return that. So all this is going to do is whenever this is more lazy loading or caching, lazy loading, caching, same kind of thing. It doesn't create your new broker until you request the broker. So the moment you request the broker, it will see the instance is null. It will go off and create the new broker. Now the wonderful thing about C# is that an equality will return the newly assigned property, or the newly assigned value rather. So instance equals create new broker. I could say something else. I could do that and it would still be valid. But we're not going to do that because that's silly. So this is our naive, not quite singleton, because we're not enforcing the singleton nature of this. We're going to assume that you're not creating a pub sub broker object in your world. In the editor, it's just going to create it the first time you ask for it. So in last week's tutorial, we did the singleton one, as in the singleton was going to be an object in your game that was going to have properties and values and stuff that you would serialize and set per world. This is literally just going to be empty. There's going to be nothing in the inspector. But the reason that we want to do it this way is that we can add debug items to the inspector. We may even want to do editor tools so that you can see what's published, what's subscribed to things, how many events it's published, that kind of thing. We can expand on that through the wonder of Unity editing. In fact, actually, I could do that after this. I could do that as a separate tutorial. Still thinking about these tutorials and what we can actually do with them. So first off, we're now going to get away from statics. We are going to get into the actual meat and potatoes of pub sub. So public void subscribe. Now this is going to be a very naive way of doing things. There is a greater scope for smart things in pub sub, and I will try and explain that as we go and after we've done some of the stuff. So the first thing we want is the name of the event. So we want to have a tag for the event. So in the previous example, it was switch light off. So you would have subscribe, switch light off. And then we want an action. And that action will be actually no, we'll just call it callback. So that's the event name, that's the callback. Right now, we're not going to pass anything to it. We're not going to get anything from it. It's just going to be a simple function. And what we're going to create in here is a private dictionary string and that will be our event library. So that is where we're going to store all our actions. So what do you do to subscribe? Well, event library contains key event name So First off, we want to make sure that we have a list to add things to. If we don't, we create it. And then what we do is we go to event library, event name, add callback. That's literally all we need to do. Public void publish string event name, and what we do is if event library, I keep doing has key rather than contains key. There's something, there's another function, there's another class that, or maybe it's another language that has key rather than contains key. In fact, I think it's player prefs. Yeah, it's player prefs. That's where I'm getting confused. So if we do not have that, we're going to throw an exception. So this is wrong because it cares that this doesn't exist. No, what we're actually going to do here is just return here, and we're going to do debug.log error or log warning. We're going to warn them that this event was not found. Doesn't care, it still goes on. If we do find it, however, event library, event name, now this is very naive. This is a very simple, very obvious way of doing pub sub. However, what we actually want to do here is wrap this in a try catch. And again, the reason for this is because we want to call all of these callbacks regardless of whether or not one of them fails. Otherwise, it's pointless. If you have an error in something, you want to know about it, but you also want to keep going with the pub sub. So what we do here is we debug.log error. Sorry, not log error, log exception. So that will just pump out what it would normally do. If it caught an exception, it would just log that exception in the console. And in this case, it will catch it, log it, keep going. Doesn't need to do anything else. So that's it, that's pub sub. Nah, only kidding. We'll do an example and then we will expand upon it. Because again, this is a very naive thing. All we're doing is subscribing to an event and getting something out of it. What we want to do after this is start adding parameters into it. We want to start sending values. We want to know who sent it. All that kind of thing. So first off, we'll go back to Unity. Let it compile. We now have our pub sub broker. We're not going to add it to this. What we are going to do in here is we are going to do I'm going to do a pub sub publisher. I don't know if I want to call it subscriber or listener. I'll call it subscriber just for consistency's sake. So in pub sub subscriber, what we want in here is public Unity event on message received. We want public string event name. We want on awake. We want pub sub broker.instance.subscribe event name and then we want a callback, public void message received. And what we can do here is on disable, or actually no, we want the counterpart to awake is destroy. Public on destroy and we will implement this in here as the opposite of subscribe. So you've got exactly the same stuff in here. And just rename these for consistency. And again, if it doesn't contain that, we don't care, we'll just return. And then we'll just remove it from the list. So the reason you want to do this is so that you don't have stuff left over, because what will actually happen is if you destroy that game object, that action will still remain in that list and it will try and invoke it. And Unity will throw a wobbler if you do that. And it'll go, hey, no, this thing's null, you shouldn't be calling stuff on it, don't do that. One of the things we will do later is we will check to see if the callback is null and remove it automatically. That's one of the things we can do. But for now, we won't do anything. So on message received invoke, that's all we need to do for the subscriber. For the publisher, again, that's all we need to do for that. That's all you need to do to publish an event, is say, I want to publish this event name. Now, we're going to build on this quite soon. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to do what we did before. We're going to tag that, bring in the button itself, and tell it to publish light off. And then in here, we're going to listen for light off. And we're going to turn it off. We're going to play that. Press the button, light goes off. We can keep pressing the button, nothing will happen. What we can do now is make that text light off. So, what if we want to turn it back on again? What if we want to make that a toggle? Well, what we can do is we can duplicate the button. Call that one light on. And publish a new event called light on. And what we can do on here is we can have two subscribers, one for light off and one for light on. That's a perfectly valid way of doing things. However, we can keep the number of subscribers to a minimum by changing that to light toggle. Just keep the names of things a little bit more consistent. And what we're going to do here is, instead of this, we're going to have public class Boolean event So what this is going to do is it's going to create a new class called Boolean event, and that is going to be serializable. So we'll do another public Unity event on, that was wrong, it should be bool event And what's going to happen in here is we now have on Boolean message received Boolean. I'm going to take that out, turn that on. And then in here, everything that's Boolean. In fact, actually, again, my camera's in the way. I'll do it up here. Everything that is Boolean is at the top. And what this can do is, instead of just calling the functions like it is there, so if I clicked, so it is static is there twice, and it's set active is in there twice. So set active gives you that top tick box like it would do if it was up the top there. However, if we do set active, that tick box isn't there anymore. The parameter you send into there will toggle it, will send that value. So how else do we do this? Well, in the subscriber, what we can do is now this doesn't exist yet. Oh, it's rename. It's okay. So what we actually want is we want to keep that back because we do want to keep that for a while. We're going to copy this, put this in here. Actually, do we? No, we don't. So we're gonna keep this like that. What we're actually going to do is make that generic. And we're going to change this from an action to an action object. So it's going to take one parameter in, and we are going to publish that value in the invoke. Now, this is, again, a very naive way of doing things. You just send in an object, you store the object, you send it back out again. What you have to remember with this way of doing things is that if you publish an event with a Boolean value, for example, but it's expecting a string or an integer or something other, anything else, it will throw a wobbler. It'll likely throw an exception, which will catch and continue on. It's one of the reasons we put the exception catching in there in the first place. What you can do to expand on this is, instead of just having one broker, you could have a broker for each type. So every time you ask for a broker for every time you want to subscribe to an event with an integer, you'll get that. Every time you want to subscribe to something with a float, you'll get something else, etc., etc. However, you have to work out yourself what you want out of it. So right now, this is what we're going to get. It will throw an exception if it's the wrong type. That might not be what you want to do. What you could do is just have this as object, and you'll send an object, and then the subscriber will be the one that will take in an object and cast it to what it wants to be. And it will deal with any of the weirdness. Right now, we're not going to do that. So again, we have problems here, because it is now expecting something else. So we will publish a Boolean with the value. and we will take out the other event. So here comes the other thing, is we have to cast this. Yeah, this is where the confusion comes in. I believe yeah. That, yeah, we don't need the where. That should work. Yeah, that should hopefully work. So now we have to set up our thing again. So we have our buttons now. Pub sub. That's on. And off. And if we watch the... No. Here, need it. Need to move that light away. Move that button away. Okay, so let's see. Light off. Light on. Okay, well, it's not causing an exception, which is nice. No, it is. I just had it off. So, where are we? So we are getting a null reference exception. Is the callback null? Well, I'll tell you what. We're going to do it. We're going to do some debugging. We're going to attach to Unity. We are going to start. We're going to hit light off. Callback is null. So our cast here is what's causing the problem. Yeah, it's our generics. We'll just do it the other way just now, where the subscriber is the one to deal with casting. So this should hopefully work. Oops, a broker. Light off, light on, light off, light on. our light is going off and on. So this is kind of what I didn't want to do with this, so is have the subscriber deal with casting. We do want to have the subscriber deal with filtering, so what we're going to do instead is create another class. So we're going to have, because this was an intermediate step. Let's say class, we're going to create a struct. So this is going to be our new message queue. This is going to be our new message format. And instead of object, we're going to be sending a pub sub message. And what we're going to do is add a new value into there. And we're going to send the message. We're going to do something smart in here. I'm going to create a function called getValue, and we're going to do all our lovely stuff in here. So the pub sub message is going to figure out if we can cast value to t. So if value is t, return and this default t is very, very handy. If you are a class, for example, if you're a game object, it will return null as your default. If you are an integer or a float or whatever, it will, I think it will return 0. Let's double check that. So it's whatever, if you were to do that, that will be 0 by default, because you've not assigned it. It's whatever the default assignment is, so it should be 0. So that is our new message queue. But now we also need to send this as the thing that sent it. We can also do a bunch of funky stuff in the broker here as well to get other things, because it might not be a component that sends this. You could have this off in a static. Like, anything can use this. Anything can use this. Like, you could have this off in... You can have this off in another thread or something. Maybe not thread safe. But you can have this off somewhere else. You can have this off in a static library. You can have this off in something asynchronous. You can do whatever you want with this. Even though it's creating a game object in the world, you can still do whatever the hell you want with it. Get value is one thing we want to do. Public get sender game object. And what we do with this is if sender is game object return game object sender. That's pretty much it. So if the sender is a game object, not quite sure how that can work, but just for shits and giggles, I just wanted to show you the steps through. If somehow the game object itself has subscribed to something and is the sender of this, it will cast it to that. If it's a component, it will cast it to the component, which can then go off and get the game object. If not, it will just return, no, it doesn't, no. We'll change these names to be a bit more robust. We don't really need that. What we do need is this. Get sender as component. So this can cast things to what we need it to be. We're not really going to use these right now, but these are the kind of things that you can do with PubSub that you can't really do with the Unity event system. This is where we start breaking out of the Unity event system. Because if, for example, so we'll just show you this. On Boolean message received, add listener. That Unity action call why are they not working? Why are they not working? That's right, yeah. Unity actions just okay. Okay, so the problem here is that we only have, from this, we only have the value that came in. We don't know where it came from. We don't know the context of it. Because you could just as easily have another event going into the same thing, you won't know what it is. So what we do with this PubSub message struct is we just give it more information. And this is the core of PubSub. That you get more information out of it than the basic Unity stuff. It decouples things, so you can use this within prefabs, and it will just work. So what we'll do in here is we'll create a prefab. We'll create this button as a prefab. So you can see here that the only thing this event does is talk to itself. So if I made this a prefab, we'll rename that lights off. I'm going to delete that. That was wrong because that's lights on. Sorry, I've got a bit of a sniffle today. So we'll turn that off, And we will create in here a horizontal layout group. We'll drag this in. That's wrong. We'll just put that at the top of the screen. We'll give it some nice padding anyway, 12, 12, 12, and 12, just to make it a little bit better, and we'll pad it out a bit. Okay, so that's what that's going to look like when they're all in there. We'll get rid of that though, because we want to spawn these in later. That's the whole point of it. I'm going to create a quick script called UI Spawner. It's going to take in our two prefabs. Actually, no, just game object array, prefabs, on awake. And what we'll do is we'll put in our light off and our light on. Then we'll hit play on that. Create a light off, click light on. We'll give us something a bit more obvious to work with here. I'm going to create an image in the middle. We're going to take this light, we're going to take this pub subscriber. I'm going to paste that in there. And we're going to do exactly the same thing in here. So we now have two things that are listening for the same event. You can see there, that's a bit more obvious that stuff's happening. What we'll also do now is we will delete the directional light. So now if we go into the console, watch this. Nothing. It's fine. It doesn't care. It doesn't go mental because we stuck in the on destroy. It unsubscribed from that event. So if we, so one of the things we want to do is the debug mode. So one of the things I said we'd do is we would have some way of seeing in here in the inspector what's going on inside the pub sub broker. So we will add that in just now, quite quickly. We're going to quickly do an editor event, an editor tool, a property drawer, or something like that. So what we will do is in the project, we create ourselves a folder called editor. Now what editor does is it's a special name. Doesn't matter where this folder is, it can be inside another folder. You can create lots of editor folders. And what this means is this won't get compiled when you go to build. And what we'll call that is pub sub broker inspector. And it spools up, compiles it, realizes it's an editor script. And what we'll find when we go into Visual Studio is that we have a new assembly with our editor folder in here. So you can see in this here, we do not have our editor folder. Instead, it is now inside this assembly. And what we can hear is we can now use Unity Editor, and rather than a model behavior, we want this to be, if I can remember rightly, not editor window, it is custom editor, I believe. No. This is when you don't try and do things from memory off the cuff. Maybe it is editor window. Yeah, it's literally just editor. Okay. And we use custom editor type of pub sub broker. And what this will mean is we get a nice little class we can do stuff for. So overrides on inspector GUI. We'll comment that out. So what happens when we do the broker? Well, we'll now do what I said we shouldn't do in the first place. Is do pub sub broker. It doesn't display anything. It doesn't even display that. So what we'll do is we'll put that back in. Doesn't even display that. So we're going to leave that in because it's actually quite useful. But what we're going to do is we're going to write a new inspector for it. So we have the value. How can I put this? We have to get the property, or we have to get the custom editor inspector. So the problem is that it tends to work with, it wants to work with serialized properties. So there are no serialized properties in this, so serialized property. So that would be serialized property my property, and we would do editor GUI layout.property field my property, and that would create basically what would already be in the inspector. So with pub sub broker, what we're going to do is we're going to create a fake thing called public string my property. So that initializes that to that. And what we will see when we go back into here is we will have duplicate. So we will have two of these. Get my property twice. But as you can see, that one doesn't update. Because what we need to do next is tell it to save the changes. And to do that, we do that. So now they both behave exactly the same. But all we've done is really recreate what was already there. What we're going to do now is a bit more odd. So again, we don't need my property in here. That was just an example. What we're going to do here now is serialized object and target object. So that is our pub sub broker. We can now get whatever the hell we want out of that. We should put that in on enable. Now, what this means is that it doesn't like doing multi-editing. So what we'll also do here is or is it just default not? I think it's just default not. That's fine. been a while since I've done these. Apparently there's already something called target in there. Oh! Okay. Unity, you're very, very weird sometimes. We'll just call that broker. And we just cast target to broker then, I guess. So now what we want to do is expose some of the stuff in here. So public string array event names, and all we do is we get event library dot keys. I mean to bring link in order to convert that to an array. So we now have a list of event names. So for each var event name in event names, we do GUI layout dot label field label. No. So you want that to be full width. So now when we go into here, you see there's nothing in there. We'll just delete that for now. We'll play. Oh, subbroker. Like toggle. We now know what one of the events are. We'll make that a little bit more obvious. Yep, begin fold out. No, hang on. No, we want another label. We want another label. And we want now there is another one in here that we can set the skin. I'm sure there was a way to set the skin. Is it an extension to this? Ah, GUI style, yeah. We want to do it as a second one. So now if we go back into Unity, pops a broker, big nice header at the top called event names. And next up we want to make them toggles. So what we will do is GUI begin fold out header group, and we want to have in here a private dictionary. So we want to store that fold out stuff. So okay, so here's where Unity's here's where the editor scripts get a little bit funky. So you'll see here we're creating GUI layout.label. We're telling it to display a label on the screen. So what do you want to do when you get something a bit more interactive? Well, you have to do shit like this. So this horrible, horrible mess is we are setting the fold out toggle. We are getting it here. So we get what it is. We send it into the fold out header group function, which displays on this in the inspector the fold out header UI element. That then returns whether or not you've clicked on it, whether or not it's now open and closed. And we then set the fold out. It's horrible. It's terrible. So now we have a fold out group. So now if we've opened this thing, we want to get the subscriptions to it. So we now actually in here we want to do public action pub sub message in horizontal. So this now sets us going along the way, because that makes sense. This is how you used to have to program all of Unity's UI stuff. Before we had the inspector-based stuff, this is how you programmed Unity UI. It was disgusting. So now we want content, so we want subscriber.target. We want Yeah, actually, you know what? We don't need the horizontal. We're only going to show one thing in there. We're going to show the target label. What we do want to do, though, is here. So we go horizontal, we create a little space, then we go vertical again, we draw all the targets. Gives it a little indent. So go back into Unity, and click play. There we go. We now see the target there is the image, pub subscriber, directional light. So what we could do now is turn those into buttons. And when you click on them, it will highlight them. So we'll do that. And we'll go back to Unity. And I see that those are buttons. They don't do shit, but they're buttons now. So, how do we then select an item? Well, I just want to double check this first, because we can do editor dot, no, not editor dot, it's is it editor utility? There's a function somewhere that will say that will do the so if you come into this and then click on that, it will do that little boop boop thing. So if I wanted to hit image, it will do that. I want that. So Unity editor, highlight Unity in hierarchy. Editor GUI utility.ping object. That's the one. So what's that target instance ID? Okay, so what we want to do is if subscriber.target is Unity object, else GUI layout.label we'll do a cast. Okay, so pub sub broker image pings it, directional light pings it, score. And that's an editor script. This is why I don't like Unity editor scripts, is that this functional way of doing UI kind of makes sense, but it's fairly obvious whenever you go and do anything that's even a little bit complicated with it, that it is an absolute nightmare to work with. And I've been doing Unity since 4, maybe 5. I think 4 was the earliest one. It was the very tail end of Unity 4 that I started doing Unity. And everything in here, like that GUI layout and editor GUI layout stuff, they're separate because the GUI layout stuff was for in-game stuff. So if we go into Pub Subbroker here, I forgot that. There's non-GUI function you can overload. In here, you would do that code. So if I did this, you can see there, we've got a little hi in the top left. That's how you did UI stuff in Unity. Getting custom skins in there, getting custom images in there, doing anything with custom fonts. Horrible. Horrible, 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 terrible. Real, actual work needed to be done. Which is why there were so many different UI tools out there in the asset store at the beginning of Unity. And one of the ones that was the most popular was called NGUI. And they basically got the guy who made NGUI to make UGUI, which is Unity's GUI system, which is this lovely stuff. Because they're practically the same thing. I don't know the exact details of what went down. I understand there was a bit of a friction between Unity and the guy who did NGUI. I don't know how that went down, but UGUI is very, very similar to how NGUI was. Obviously, it's a lot different now because it's been donkey's years since UGUI came out, and it has expanded a lot in the intervening time. But this is great. This is really, really easy to get into. Whereas the old way of doing things and the way they still do things for the editor is really hard to get into. And doing editor scripts is a massive pain in the arse. And this is one of the more simpler things you can do. If you actually want to get into multi-object editing. So if you had 2 images and you did that, you can see there that it's got a little dash in it because they're different, all that kind of stuff. All that stuff is built into it, but you have to set up your objects and do things properly, and knowing what to do is difficult, and that's half the battle. And Googling it is useful, but wrapping your head around it is difficult. But it's useful. It's very, very useful when you have it down. And because I started off doing UI like this, one of the first projects I did was very UI driven. Very UI driven. It was for Historic Scotland. And it was probably one of the best things I did. One of the very first things we did. In that it had a bunch of buttons in it. You clicked on buttons, it brought up information. It basically brought up web pages, HTML. But there was no HTML renderer, so I had to write a very simple HTML parser and renderer for this. It was horrible. In the end, though, it wasn't good enough for what they wanted. So what we had to do is render the text into images and show the images one after the other. But I did write a very basic HTML parser. It's actually very similar to the text. So if we create a UI text. I'm getting off topic actually now, because we're pretty much done with this. So we did that. It just made it red. And that just made it bold. That was basically what we had in there. Bold italics. I don't even know if I had colour, but I had links actually. But other than that, But yes, so Unity editor scripts, fairly nasty things, but very useful if you can get your head around them. PubSub, very useful. So outside of all this nonsense, what does it give to you? It gives you decoupling. You can subscribe to events that don't exist. You can publish events that don't have subscribers, and it won't care. You will have a better understanding of some other things that use messaging systems, messaging queues. I'll give you some other examples of that because there are some outside of Unity that use it. So there is, so I can't remember the name of it. It was something in JavaScript, and I used it for projects, and it has gone out of my mind. Oh. What was the name of it? It was quite old. Oh, this is doing my nut in. I'm trying to Google this now, and I can't remember the name of this thing. It was .NET, and it was for we did it for multiple users on the same web page essentially. Can't remember it. It was a great example. I'm good at this. But essentially, in a networked environment, you could publish a message, and then it would just go off into the network, and it would send to the subscribers, hey, this message has been called, and it's asynchronous. Like the good thing about this is that you could, for example, in this publish, add it to a queue, and it would then send that out to the subscribers, and the subscribers would then send back saying, hey, I've acknowledged I've got this, and then it would know it wouldn't have to resend it. It would just continue to resend every so often in intervals asynchronously until every subscriber had it. But the thing that published it wouldn't care. It would just go, hey, and then keep going on with its work. The broker would be the thing that would go, hey, actually, no, I need to send this again. So the pattern of PubSub is used everywhere. It's used in so many places. And this is what I'm trying to get into doing with these tutorials, is things that exist in the wider scope of programming, especially web development, things that exist in the wider scope of development in general, applying that to Unity, and hopefully you can either use these tutorials as an in for people from out with Unity, so people who know these patterns, who know PubSub, who know singletons, can come in, go, okay, I know this is fine, and this is how we use that in Unity to learn more about Unity. Or have people who are good at Unity, who have experience with Unity, to come in and go, this is something from the wider, this is something I might not have learned just faffing about with Unity. Someone who's come in who's not a programmer or who's not educated with programming, to come in and learn more programming and learn more concepts of programming. Because programming for me, it's more about the concepts of what you can do rather than the languages themselves, the environments and things like that. They're learning Unity is not a transferable skill. You can't learn Unity and transfer that to web development. You can't learn web development and translate that into Unity directly. You need to know these patterns, you need to know these tools, you need to know these ways of doing things so that you can transfer between environments, between languages, all this kind of stuff. These things should be as fundamental in your toolbox as a for loop, is what I'm trying to say. Because any language you can have a for loop or some kind of loop. Any language you can have a pub sub pattern. Any language you can have a singleton pattern. Well, okay, maybe not any language, but most functional programming language. Okay, the word functional is also very specific. I say functional as in it means it works, rather than something like brainfuck. But functional is another thing entirely when it actually comes to programming, which is something I don't really want to explain because, to be honest, it's, you don't need to know that. Go learn Haskell, fuck you. I don't like Haskell. Not for any reason, just because it's so fundamentally different from the way I do programming. Anyway, that's the end of this tutorial. This is kind of two parts of a tutorial. There's a front end and a bit of editor tools. Next week I will do... Next week, if on Thursday, if on Christmas Eve, I don't fancy playing games, I might do pooling. Because pooling should be quite quick. But I might just play some games. And again on New Year's Eve, that's 2 weeks in a row the Thursdays have fallen on a holiday of some sort. What is the first Thursday in New Year? First Thursday in New Year's the 7th. Yeah, that's fine. I'll definitely be here on the 7th for programming stuff. But Christmas Eve I might do pooling quite quickly. But until then, thank you for coming. And for anyone on YouTube, because this is going to go on YouTube, join me on Twitch on the Thursdays at 11 UK time for more of this nonsense. So until then, thank you for joining, and let's hope that this end scene hasn't screwed up, because OBS is a piece of crap.